Today we're talking about the Modern Warfare MP5 and specifically comparing the 9mm rounds to the 10mm rounds. Obviously, we know that the 10mm rounds have always done a little bit more damage and had a fractional more range, slightly slower fire rate, and a little bit worse recoil control. And there was really no reason to use it over the 45 round mags, but somewhere along the line, we're not 100% sure, they went and actually buffed some of the values while nerfing the Modern Warfare MP5 that we saw over time. And just because it's one of those weird ammo types, it's not something we typically test unless people reach out and say, hey, you know what, have you considered testing this for a while? And 9 times out of 10, there's no difference, but in this particular case, there is an actual difference. So that's what we're gonna be talking about in today's video. Enjoy the video, learn something new. Please do me a favor, hit the like button if you're brand new, want to find your way back. Double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. So here is the head-to-head for the Modern Warfare MP5 and the 10mm rounds. And what we'll notice is there is a little bit of a difference here, but there's also some huge similarities, and that's what we're going to focus on here. So the difference between the headshot damage is 5 damage. We have 3 damage to the chest, stomach is 3, and then limbs are also 3, which impact these shots to kill. Not necessarily for the headshot damage, but it goes from 8 down to 7, 9 down to 8, and 10 down to 9. This will also impact the overall average damage or DPS of these weapons. I ended up testing the fire rate, which we'll go ahead and check out, but those end up being essentially the exact same, maybe half a frame difference or something like that, where it's so negligible that it's not even worth factoring into the equation. Then when it drops off, we end up with the exact same damage profile. Obviously, after 16 meters, this changes again, while this one on the bottom stays indefinite. So you get this all the way up into infinity. And then that one drops off, and this is where the big issue comes in. In terms of damage per mag, we have this in this middle section. We get 1,500 damage per mag, which allows us to down 6 players if we are super accurate. This means 100% chest shots that you would be able to down 6 players without reloading. When we compare that to the 10mm rounds, which only have 30 bullets, even though they do slightly more damage at 37.5 average damage, you only end up with 1125 point blank damage per mag, which only equates to 4 people if you are 100% accurate. Given the fact that most people, even on the top end, are 30% accurate, you're talking about having some inconsistencies here where you're probably going to down 1, potentially 2, and you really won't get more than that. You'll have to reload to finish off the third, or finish them off, or take on a third or fourth. So movement is going to be key, and that is one of the biggest drawbacks with the Modern Warfare weapons, is that they only have terrible movement. They don't really have amazing movement like a lot of the Cold War weapons that have transitioned to being a majority of the meta. That being factored in, once we get to the next damage drop off, this is where the bullets would ideally work in a better scenario, where if you had a 45 round mag, universally the 10mm rounds would be the way to go. There's no difference between these from about 10 meters up to about 16 meters, maybe about 17 if you're putting on the monolithic suppressor. You get an extra meter out of it. Essentially, within the 10 to 17 meters, these are pretty much the same. And technically marginally different. The RPM would be slightly slower on the 10mm rounds, and you'd have a little bit more recoil, so it could be a little bit harder to use. So that's kind of where these are going to suffer. But then when you go a little bit further, you can see that this damage per mag is 825, and you're only able to down 3 people with 100% chest accuracy, which in a scenario, hey, if you're using this sniper support in solos, you could probably get away with it. You will probably be able to land 10 out of 30 bullets to the chest and stomach to get a 10-shot TTK, which is okay at 678 TTK. Not amazing, but you could also accomplish pretty much the same thing with the standard mag within those ranges. Once you get beyond 16 meters, you're talking about a little bit more true sniper support, where you're going to have that true range, where there are other SMGs that will outperform that. On top of that, what we'll take a look at here is the reload. We'll talk a little bit about normal reload, sleight of hand, and the difference. So there's different types of reload animations that we would talk about when we go ahead and test different things for reloading. What the main thing we're going to look at is 1 bullet reload. So what we'll do is, normally if we fire the bullets, we can get a rate of fire right here. We can kind of identify how fast the gun fires bullets as they come out. It ends up being relatively the same, even though marginally different. It's so negligible you wouldn't really even notice. But when it comes to the reload, there's 4 different ways that you can look at reload. One is when your magazine is not empty. So anytime between 1 bullet all the way up to 45 bullets in a standard mag, you will be able to reload, and it will be faster than reloading with 0 bullets, because 0 bullets leads to a different type of reload because there's an extra animation thrown in that usually adds on a decent amount of time. On top of that, there's also the reload add time. When the bullets actually change, so when you reload the mag here, you're going to see it go up to 45 bullets there. That is when the bullets are added to the mag, and you can do a YY weapon swap and you'll be able to use the weapon right away. But if you're looking to identify a little bit more, like, hey, you know, when's the gun fireable, it's when the crosshairs reappear, and that's when the first bullet will be able to come out. So from this point to here, so now you have that. So you have the full reload animation from crosshair to crosshair, reload add time, with 1 bullet at least in the gun or more, or 0 bullets. And that leads to a lot of different scenarios on reload time for both of these weapons. They actually do have different reload animations depending on how you do the weapon, but I went through and tested those head to head, and then we'll go ahead and look at the results. So a lot of numbers on the screen, but we'll go ahead and get to these TTKs in a little bit. But what we're gonna look at here is the reload add time is 1.7 seconds, so pretty standard. 2.7 for the full reload animation, which is significantly slow. And that's one of the biggest problems with this 10 mil rounds, because you are likely going to have to reload, and having a 3-second reload is very punishing, considering you can get closer to 1.2 seconds if you're using the OTS, like a 1.5 seconds or something like that if you're using the Mac 10, significantly faster reload speeds. If you do a full reload with 0 bullets in it, so if you actually run out of bullets and you have to reload, then you end up with a slower reload animation, like a couple frames, maybe 4 frames different. Not so significant that it's like, oh my God, you can't do it that way, but it's enough here where you're gonna add on 70 milliseconds, which could be important, especially in certain types of gunfights. When we do sleight of hand, this is where sleight of hand almost becomes a mandatory attachment, especially in higher game modes of trios or quads, maybe even duos, especially for these 10 mil rounds. If you're challenging people right beyond 10 meters, where it's kind of gonna be in a very bad spot compared to the 10 to 17 meters that the standard rounds 9mm would actually benefit, because you get an extra 15 bullets for that damage range, and then obviously beyond that you got the difference. You can bring it down to about 2 seconds, which cuts down the reload time by about 33% overall on those individual weapons. So sleight of hand is almost mandatory in pretty much all the other modes except for solos. You could probably get away with just using another one, maybe put on another hipfire attachment, do something for mobility, because these guns tend to suffer with mobility. Now let's get into the TTK, which is pretty important. So when it comes to the TTK, people are like, a lot of people ask me, hey, is this going to be meta? Is this meta? Is this going to be meta? No, it's not going to be meta. And I'll explain why. In my opinion, it is a great solo weapon. Duos kind of can get away with it, but it is not good enough, in my opinion, to be using in trios and quads for the vast majority. There are some top level players can know how to finesse, but I guarantee you they would much rather have XYZ meta SMG than this with the 10 mil rounds. And let's go ahead and take a look at how this looks. So overall, we have the TTK chart here. And the lower the number is, the better. The higher the number is, the worse it is. So we can see here, very close, we have the Modern Warfare MP5, 9mm rounds versus 10mm rounds versus the AS Val. And this is a specific reason why I chose the AS Val. So right here, the difference between these is negligible. Like we can see here, it's 452 versus 475. And these are like numbers where it would be the most common occurrence of TTK. Obviously, there's instances where it could be slightly faster, slightly slower, but the most common occurrence that you will probably run into when using this weapon are these values right here. And that's what draws a lot of people towards this 10 mil rounds, because you're getting a TTK faster than the AS Val, which is pretty nuts. And that's up to about 10 meters. Then after that, it kind of is still kind of average. but you get a little bit more forgiveness, especially since this will go well beyond 10 meters, up to 20, 30, 40 meters. As long as you're going to be able to hit your shots, you can still have a pretty reliable TTK, even though you're only getting 30 bullets. So you can see the AS-Val performs consistent all the way across, and the AS-Val has never really been meta outside of solos. People use as sniper support or whatever, and I'm guessing the MP5 will be very similar. The difference between those is so negligible, and then obviously this MP5 is still pretty good, but then it drops off, and most people would argue at this range right here, this TTK isn't all that competitive against things like the Mac 10 will generally outperform it. And there's a few other SMGs that will outperform it at some of these ranges right here. So in reality, the main reason, even though the benefit is nice, like right here in this red area, the actual practicality of this 10 mil rounds is really within the 10 meters. So if you're going to use it like at the shotgun ranges, you are going to get the maximum effectiveness of it. If it was a 45 round mag, then maybe it could compete as a sniper support, but you're better off using AS-Val if you're going to be using this as a sniper support. You need to use this as a true SMG and just take advantage of this insane TTK that is within 10 meters. So with that being said, we're going to have two different builds for you. Now I've explained what scenarios make sense to use each, and it's really up to you to figure out what's going to make the most sense. At the end of the day, there is a little bit of personal preference. So one of the biggest things that's personal preference, there's a negligible difference, is the monolithic suppressor versus the monolithic integral suppressor. One of the biggest differences is the integral suppressor has no tracer, so people won't see where the bullets are coming from, and that is the main difference between them. Obviously, there's some fractional differences between them, but it has the main difference that I think put the integral suppressor above it. And then if you're going to go for the 45 round mag, you could get away with just using the 5 milliwatt. That gives you a little bit more damage per mag, and you have time to choose when you're going to reload. You can get away with having this particular build and having a nice hipfire build. If you're going to go with these 10 mil rounds, it's almost like have to have sleight of hand. If you feel confident in your ability and you're only going to use it in solos, maybe you get rid of that, put on 5 milliwatts, so you're still a hipfire machine, but you cannot afford to miss because you are missing bullets. You do not have enough damage per mag to take on multiple people or to go ahead and chow someone. If you are missing shots, you are penalized very hard, and you're going to get caught in a very hard reload, especially if it's combining with this with something that's going to be used for long range. So hopefully that gives you a better idea on when and how you should be using this weapon. If you did enjoy the video, learn something new, please do me a favor, hit the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.